good afternoon. It's good to be here. Alisia McClain, Executive Director of the Louisville Future of Work Initiative. It's a partnership between Microsoft and the city of Louisville around preparing Louisville for innovative technologies such as AI, IoT, basically all things data science. We have a really amazing team, one of whom is here with us today. Her name is Jade Brown. She's an AI innovator with the Future of Work. We'll be hearing from her in a second. And so the real purpose of the Future of Work is sort of to support all components of the ecosystem. And we can't do that, in the data ecosystem. And we can't do that without fantastic partners like Dean Dorton. And I continue to be personally and professionally amazed at just how supportive they are of the work that we are doing and of the ecosystem, the tech and data ecosystem in Louisville in general. I think they really serve as a model on how a company can be both a for-profit company while also still leaning into its values and supporting the ecosystem that it is a part of. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Judy Nichols with Dean Dorton and Ed McGillis. If you all can introduce yourselves, that would be amazing. Then we'll pass it back to Jade and have her introduce herself. Judy?
Sure, thanks very much, Alisia. So I'm Judy Nichols. I am the Director of Data Analytics and Collaboration at Dean Dorton. And we are a full service consulting organization with deep roots in the accounting industry and technology services. And our team came on about a year ago. We were formerly Breakpoint Technology. They brought us in specifically to help build out the data analytics team. And we have been a longtime gold partner for Microsoft, and we focus heavily in looking at not only how do you build visualizations and do more with data, but how do you think about the strategy of data and how does it make your company more successful? So partnering with the Future of Work Initiative has been fabulous. We've really enjoyed it over the last few years since it was created, and we're really excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Judy. I want to turn it over to Ed. Tell us a little bit about what you do for Dean Dorton.
Hi, I'm Ed McGillis. I am the data and AI consulting lead, work on Judy's team. As she said, we were brought into Dean Dorton to help expand what's going on in data and business analytics, both inside Dean Dorton and for our clients. So a lot of what that is showing how data and analytics can exist in every organization, every business, no matter where you're at on that path. We'll get into a little more detail about that later as well, but very excited to be here today and talk a little bit about what we do and what we're doing in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ed. And then turn it over to Jade Brown on our team. Jade is an AI innovator. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do for the Future of Work?
Hello, yes, I'm Jade, and like Alisia said, I work for the Future of Work Initiative, where part of my role is data analytics. So actually doing the data analytics for Future of Work and making sure that we're hitting our goals, but also teaching others how they can go from whatever field they're coming from to data analytics and excel in it. So yeah, I'm excited to teach everyone today or whenever the workshop is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jade. I can't tell you enough how amazing it is to have Jade on our team. She's graduated with a double major in accounting and computer information systems. So she's the whole deal. She's the whole shebang. She brings it all, and it's really exciting. I wonder if at one point we might lose her to Dean Dorton, but that's another conversation for another day. That's
What
okay.
a great idea.
So thanks everybody for introducing yourselves. Judy, I'm going to ask you a question. Who is data analytics for? I mean, is this specifically for tech-enabled, very tech-focused, data-driven data companies that center around a business model where money is made off of data, or who's data analytics for?
That's a really good question. I heard this great discussion the other day on one of a podcast that I was listening to, and they made an excellent point. There is no company out in existence today that doesn't involve technology. And I would take that even a step further and say there is no company in existence today that doesn't use data in some way. And so if you think about it from that perspective, every company is a candidate for utilizing data analytics because we're collecting all these masses of data. We've got to think about what are we doing with it? What does it mean for us? How are we putting it to use? There's no point in just storing it somewhere. We've got to actually think about how does it make our business better? How do we use it to think about the best way to push us forward in a predictable way and in a way that helps us achieve our business goals? And if not, why? Why would we not want to do that? So everybody may be at a different point in the continuum and they may want to do it at a different level, but everybody has a need for analyzing and making better use of their data.
So now every company is a technology company and a data company. That's a fantastic observation to make. Jade, I wanted to ask you a question. As someone who became interested in data, what are you seeing as, I don't want to assume anyone's age here, but as someone from a different generation from me, what are you seeing as far as educationally, sort of what is the framework, or what are you seeing around how did you decide to get interested in data? Was it something that was pushed, or something in school that seemed like a great idea, or just something you liked, or sort of what are your thoughts from a different generation as to the importance of data?
Yeah, so my journey through data honestly came from what I didn't like. So I was working at a large corporation in their IT department, and I went through a couple of different internships that I just wasn't interested in. So someone mentioned Power BI to me. It was like a big buzzword, and I was like, what is that? So I started an internship that involved using Power BI and SQL. And once I saw that you could take these large amounts of data, these big numbers, all these different essentially rows of data, and put them into something where people can actually understand what's going on, I was like, why are we not being taught this in school? So yeah, that's where my data journey started. So I started using Power BI and SQL maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. And then I transitioned to the future of work. And I wanted to lead into the second part of that question. Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. No, that was it. Sort of, is there a focus or an emphasis around like learning data? And I think you answered that by saying, like, why aren't we being taught this in school? And so I feel like you've answered the question, and it's been interesting to really hear about your journey and how for you personally, someone just mentioned it and you sort of like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You know, I love what you said about taking huge amounts of information and making it sort of palatable for the masses, and making it something that can be understood by lay people, let's say. And that leads me actually right into what it is that you and Ed are doing with Dean Dorton, which I think is so exciting. I'm going to ask Ed first. Can you tell me a little bit about the workshops that you all have been helping us with around, or partnering with us on around data analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Alisia mentioned, we've been working with the Future of Work initiative to come up with a way for organizations and people, whether they're in school or they're just trying to improve their own skill sets, to get introduced to data analytics, AI, and machine learning. And so as we've done this over the last 1 to 2 years, we've started with a workshop that focused on the base data analytics, so essentially visualization, where we had everybody walk through what a Power BI solution looks like. For those that don't know that are watching this video, Power BI is a data visualization tool from Microsoft. A portion of it is free and very accessible to the public, which is why we focused on using that tool. But the idea was just walking and exposing people that may not have seen data analytics and visualization in practice through some sample data sets that Jade and I had put together, walking them through what that culminates in visually, how technically that process works, and then how they can go back to their own organization or continue to improve their own skills with real world solutions and build on the knowledge they have during the workshops. So in addition to our base workshop, which we've completed a couple times now, Jade and I are currently putting together one that's more focused on AI and machine learning itself. So this is one where we start to get into bigger data sets. We start building what you'll hear as machine learning models. So across, regression, classification, clustering, those types of problems, we're going to create models to solve problems and answer questions inside of those data sets. This is a little more advanced than what we did in the strictly Power BI intro workshop, but it's a lot of the problem with people getting started and learning AI and machine learning is there's a tendency to at least perceive that there's a high bar to getting involved. So they have to go to college, and they have to learn all of this math, this algebra, all these different statistical methods to get involved. And it's really has simplified a little bit over the last few years, the tools that are available, especially from Microsoft in Microsoft Azure, which we'll be using for our sessions. The ability to be able to jump in and solve some of these problems in more of a low code or non-developer, non-statistician way has begun to mature. And so we want to spotlight that and get people involved in these technologies so they can feel like they can participate in what's really a revolution in the workspace and the technical space as far as career opportunities and solving real business problems out there.
That's fantastic. And what I keep hearing is that, going back to what Judy said at the very beginning, of everyone can benefit from understanding their data. Jade, I want to ask you another question from the generational perspective. What if I think of data and I'm like, oh, yawn, I'm already bored. I guess what I'm saying is everyone can benefit from understanding their data from a business side. Do you think that it's important that everyone understand machine learning, for example? Do you think that that's important for everybody, especially with the upcoming generations who are entering the workforce and the community at large? Do you think it's important that they learn about machine learning, and why or why not?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, it's in our everyday life. Like when we think about Instagram, Facebook, when we think about the ads, when we think about technology, period, a lot of the time we don't think about what's going on behind the scenes. Like, why on Instagram am I seeing this every day? And then, that can go into a whole psychological, the issues of the world. But when you think about also going into the workforce, jobs are being taken over by robots. I mean, jobs are being taken over by AI and ML, but there's also a need for people behind those machines. So it's good to, for one, know what those machines are producing, and then for two, to know how to operate those machines as well.
That is a fantastic answer. I love hearing your feedback and your perspective. And talking about understanding those algorithms that a lot of people don't understand. They just think, oh, I know my parents, for example, think that Big Brother is watching. And I'm like, yes, to a certain extent. But when you accept those terms and conditions, that's you saying It's okay to pump up an algorithm that's going to show me what I want to see, an ad based on my prior search history. And so we're actually giving permission for these algorithms to have access to our data and to our information, which of course brings up the issue of ethics and privacy, which is definitely something that has to be considered as well. And so I just wanted to ask you, Judy, is that sort of a concern for clients that you all serve, or issues around ethics and data privacy and such? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It certainly can be an issue for them. And sometimes when it's not, we try to make sure that they're thinking about that as we work through things with them. Some of our clients that are in industries such as healthcare certainly have extreme issues around those areas, and they have to meet certain regulatory standards and others that they want to meet up with. But we all have to have, and we expect this with our customers, and they expect it of us. We all have to have a very high standard of what are we looking at? How are we using it? In some cases, these are very new technologies that we're moving into, and we're not sure exactly what all the implications are going to be. So we've got to take our time and be paying attention and be watching to understand what happens, where can the biases be that we may not have been aware of, and how are we paying attention to what's going on? How are we protecting people's privacy? And where are we making sure, from our perspective, we have to make sure that our customers understand, yes, perhaps a certain platform meets HIPAA standards, for example, but it's how you use it in a day-to-day basis that it maintains those standards. And we have to think about all those types of protections and keep an eye on all of that. And so data is critically important for that, right? Everybody's personal protective data is really important that you keep an eye on all of that and pay attention to it.
So that's not something I necessarily thought of in the context of the services that Dean Dorton provides, in the sense that you are helping your clients be thoughtful about how they use their data, how their data meets or does not meet certain standards. It's a really neat thing and neat component that's part of, if I'm a company thinking about, do I have the capacity to, or do I want to partner with Dean Dorton, that, hey, they're actually going to help me to make sure that my data is protected and that the data that I'm using is of a certain standard, and then I'm not violating ethics around privacy. That's really interesting. So let's say, Judy, oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so it may not necessarily be my specific team, but we have a cybersecurity team, for example. We also have another team that focuses specifically on those standards and regulatory issues and helps to audits and to ensure that people are following those standards. So we've got some different divisions within our group that can help us cover all of those areas, which comes in very handy. I love having the additional people who are experts in those areas, because you can't be all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that's really interesting. You've got a whole division on cybersecurity.
Mhm.
So you've kind of got the whole kit and caboodle at Dean
We
Dorton.
do, yeah.
That's fantastic. So in my head, let's say I'm a business thinking about, perhaps partnering with Dean Dorton, but I'm thinking like, golly, this is going to be way out. Maybe I'm a small business, maybe I'm a startup. And I'm thinking this is going to be way outside of my price range. This is for when I get huge, and have just money, when I go public or something, and I just have money to spend. Is there any sort of consideration around perhaps the economic or fiscal needs of a business, perhaps a smaller business that does want to get involved and better understand their data, but perhaps doesn't think they have the financial means to do so?
Absolutely. So we try to meet our customers where they are. And one of the ways, for example, that we are doing that is we have what we call a journey approach. So with a journey approach, we can help you look at what is the amount of items on your wish list. What is it? Where are you starting from? What is it that you need to get done? And we'll put together a package that allows you to pay in a budgeted approach X amount per quarter. And we will have a set amount of work that we'll work on. We'll help you prioritize the items that you want to do, and we'll help you get there on a quarterly basis, starting from point A and getting to the end goal of where you want to be. So you can budget for it, you can plan for it, and it can be a small amount, it can be a larger amount, just depends on what works for you. And Ed, I think if you want to maybe share a little bit about kind of how people fit into different areas, because not everybody starts at the same place.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is part of what we touch on, as Judy mentioned, during the data journey. So different organizations are going to be at different levels of their journey when they reach out or when we start to work with them. So we picture it as an arc that's going, starting here, it ends up here. So down at the beginning of the arc or the data journey, most organizations are what we call in a descriptive phase of analytics, which really just includes, reports, spreadsheets that are being created about organization performance, things that you would expect in an organization. Every organization has some component of that happening. They have to do some kind of reporting, whether it's operational, financial, managerial. There's something out there now. Now, the question is, where are the pain points with that? Even if they're starting at a simple level, are those numbers, are those figures getting to people they need to get to? Are they being able to search those for insights? Are they being able to distribute those automatically to the stakeholders that need them? So that's where we can jump in right away and help at that beginning level. But then as they mature, we start getting into how do we automatically pull out insights? How do we get predictive about what's going to happen? What are sales or what are target metrics going to be over the next fiscal year based on the past fiscal year plus whatever micro and macroeconomic factors we want to figure into that. So as we get more mature, we get to that side of the curve where we're looking at, predictive and prescription analytics, and that's where we fall into really the AI and machine learning that Jade and I were just covering a little while ago. We actually have to start creating models because the data gets complex, and we want to predict what's going to happen in the future. But that said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with jumping in at the lower end. So at the starting end, if we're just at descriptive analytics, since every organization has that, there are lots of improvements to be made. That's where we do a lot of our assistance and our consulting at to help organizations out. Because if you don't have that piece figured out, it's very hard to move on to the more advanced data analytics topics.
It's interesting. I like the differentiation between this sort of descriptive phase and the predictive phase. Jade, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this Power BI workshop that's coming up, which I think would probably be starting in sort of the descriptive phase. What could folks expect to learn at one of you and Ed's workshops in the context of Power BI?
Yeah, so like Ed mentioned earlier, Power BI is a data analytics tool where you can import data and create visualizations from the data. So you'll learn some of the basics as far as how to actually import data, how to clean data before you can create visualizations, and then how to create visualizations. As far as the advanced Power BI workshop or advanced data analytics workshop, the Power BI portion will be the introduction. But for our more basic or intro to Power BI workshops, we'll take a deeper dive into how to create those visualizations and create an entire dashboard.
That's fantastic. And then Ed, where would that go from there? So we've created the dashboard, we've learned how to clean and sort of wrangle our data, how to deal with null values and all of those great things that are 90% of data analytics, right? And now I'm ready to move from the descriptive phase into sort of the more predictive or prescriptive phase. Can you tell me sort of just a little bit about what that would look like in the context of this workshop?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier, but to go into more detail here, what we decide is what type of model to bring to solve a problem. So it has to do with what problem we want to solve. So we have three general areas of models that we were going to talk about: regression, classification, and clustering. So each three of those answers a different set of questions about data that we have or insights that we need. So just to run over those, regression basically boils down to wanting to predict something. If I want to predict where housing prices are going to be next year, I use a regression model. So that takes all my data, I feed it what parameters to use, what outside data, and it comes up with a number. And then our job as practitioners is to figure out if that's accurate. We need to evaluate the model, and we'll walk through that as well. Classification tends to be a yes or no problem. Is something this or is it not? Is something true? Is something false? It has a lot of applicability into healthcare, for example, when they're doing trials, things that have a lot of data coming at them where they have to assign yes, no, true, false, it worked, it didn't work, parameters to things. It's also what we all see when we get the CAPTCHAs that come up, click every boat in this picture. Those are classifications where pictures have been fed into a supervised system to learn what a boat looks like on a picture. So we'll be covering the classification problem. I think clustering is a little different animal, but really, really interesting for businesses and organizations. It's if you have a lot of data and you don't know how it's related, the clustering models basically tell you where your clusters are inside of a data set. So if you have a group of clients and you feed the information into the system, it could break them up into maybe small clients that are local to Kentucky, medium clients that are have a national footprint, small clients that are actually international. It'll come up with ways without you feeding a model more information to break down your data and group it into actionable insights. And so very powerful and a real interesting kind of sub area of AI and machine learning that we want to touch on in this workshop.
Okay, so this all sounds gravy, and this question is for Jade, but I feel like this workshop isn't for me. This is probably for someone who wants to sit around with multiple screens all day because they just can't have enough screens. This is my husband, by the way, who just can't have enough screens. He cannot have enough screens. Is there an entry point for me if I haven't worked with data before, Jade?
Yes, definitely. So when you asked the first question earlier about my journey into data, so for me, part of my interest in data was graphic design, which probably doesn't make sense right now. But I really like colors, I really like design, I like fashion, all of that. So I think that if we with technology, period, if we think about it more so as a way to aid us in what we're doing every day instead of thinking of it as just somebody sitting behind a desk and coding, you know, your typical IT, what people think of a typical IT person. I think that makes it easier for us to learn the material, as well as when it's being taught like by people like us who, you know, we're regular people who just happen to be in technology. So yeah, I mean, especially I've seen it with a lot of the programs that we've done at the Future of Work. A lot of people are coming, like there was one lady who went from being a beautician, hadn't touched a computer in literally 15 years, and is now working as a data analyst within a matter of like 3 months. So it's definitely doable. And the intro to Power BI workshop that Ed and I gave was a great entry point.
That's where it's at. That's where it's at.
I really love that description you just gave, Jade, because to me, that's the beauty of Power BI. It takes you out of spreadsheets and into graphic visualizations. So I can really see that journey from graphic designer to Power BI, because it's painting you a picture of what's going on with your data instead of making you read lines of numbers. And lines of numbers on a spreadsheet can just drive you buggy after a while, right? You know, not everybody loves to read rows of numbers. But if you can see the picture, for a lot of us, that's we're very visual, and it just pops at you on what's going on right then and there. And you need that visual interpretation. So that makes total sense the way you described that. That was excellent.
It really was perfect. It's data for all. It starts with Jade and Ed's workshop. And I just want to sort of bring us around to, this is very much aligned with what the Future of Work does. We are very much interested in increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the technology field, which we know is dominated by white men and Asian men, which is fine, but it's not fine, but it's not to push one group out, but rather to make more space, because we have, 400,000 IT jobs going unfilled every year. And think about, even just thinking about what Jade is saying about her initial interest was in design and even things like fashion. And there's a lot of people who would have those interests who wouldn't necessarily think about having a career in data. But it's a fantastic career. It's flexible. It's, it's high growth. And it's one of the jobs of the future. I have a tremendous respect for you, Judy. I met you probably 2 years ago, and you sought me out and made sure to have a meeting with me and see how you personally and your company at that time, Breakpoint, and Greg could help me, could support what I was trying to do. And it seems as though that has sort of manifested itself even as you continue on with Dean Dorton. I keep wondering when Ed is going to be like, we can't keep doing these workshops. And it just keeps coming. Can you just talk, because I think of Dean Dorton and you and Ed as a model for how companies can lean into their corporate social responsibility and really partner with other organizations that are trying to do what we're all doing, which is perhaps trying to increase diversity in the field, also find an entry point for anybody who perhaps just on a whim wants to take a data analytics course. Why is that important, or where does that come from you and or your company as far as leaning into the community and leaning into the ecosystem?
Yeah, so from a company perspective, it's really important. It was important to us at Breakpoint. It's very important also at Dean Dorton. When we look for new employees, we need to have a wide, diverse pool available. And the only way it's going to be there is if we help support the growth of that pool. And so we've got to reach out in a lot of different ways to help build that pool and make sure that we're making it as accessible to as many people from a wide variety of backgrounds and cultures as possible, or we won't find a diverse pool of talent to hire from. So it partly, yes, it's just good business, and partly it's also good for our community, and it's just good. So we believe in that wholeheartedly. And that was one of the reasons that when we sold Breakpoint, we looked at Dean Dorton, because they had that as part of their culture and values that we believed in and supported, and they did as well. So it's built into the culture system there. For me personally, I've also been involved in women in technology for a lot of years, and there've been working as a woman in the technology field. There's a lot of times where I've been the only woman in the room, and certainly often been the only there have not been any people of color in the room when I've been looking around. And I know that needs to change. And the only way it changes is by somebody who's there helping somebody else get in. There's plenty of jobs out there. I like the way you put it, Alisia. We're not pushing anybody out. We're helping other people join us. And it's just too important not to commit to it. And I think everybody on my team feels the same way. It's not, I'm not twisting Ed's arm to have him help with this. He's like, I got another opportunity here. We're going to go do this. He's eager, and I'll let him speak for himself. But everybody on my team is wholeheartedly in favor of doing this type of work.
That's fantastic. Thank you for saying that. It's just good. It makes me think it's just good data. It's just good. This is what we should all be doing. Everybody's lean. If everyone leans in just a little bit, we could really make a major change in our world around, these social issues that we're all. Yes, exactly. Ed, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's critically important especially when you look at machine learning and AI, that we have a diverse set of individuals that work on this technology. As Jade mentioned, it's becoming, it's infiltrating our lives at multiple levels. It's infiltrating jobs. It's going to be there because it can be productive and it can improve things. But you don't want the same group of people creating and supervising all of these automated decisions and learning. AI and ML bias is a real thing that practitioners are trying to fight against. And the first way we do that is to have more perspectives when we're building these tools and when we create these solutions. So the more people that are at the table, we can avoid some of the problems that crop up with unintended biases getting into these systems. Whether they're financial and deciding whether somebody gets a loan or can get a mortgage, or whether they show you, what's on your Facebook feed next. It can trickle down in importance, but it's still that we want to get away from that bias. Those of us that are interested in what's been termed, the AI ethics. And the easiest way to start doing that is to get more people from different backgrounds and diverse cultures involved in creating the solutions in the first place.
Fantastic. Jade, anything you want to add?
Yeah, when you were talking about just the different spaces that AI and ML are in, I just keep thinking about the medical field. We went to the Black in Tech Week maybe like 2 weeks ago in Cincinnati, and there was a lady there who had a story about she was a cancer patient, and basically her treatment plan was based off of AI ML as opposed to the doctor's opinion. So, and she was a Black woman. So, if we think about the fact that most of the people that are in technology are white men, just thinking about how that might affect a woman of color in the medical arena, when that's her body, that's a life or death situation. So yeah, that's all.
That's a great example. I mean, and that's a life or death example, right, Jade? Where if we don't have the right information keyed in and we're not seeing enough research, I mean, we're already seeing over and over, the research is showing us that there's not enough information about women's health in medicine, let alone women of color. And there's critical differences in how people should be treated. And so, you brought up a key difference right there. That's why we all need our perspectives at the table.
Yes.
As the kids say, period. That's it. I just want to say thank you so much to Judy and to Ed and to Jade. There's a lot of representation here from a lot of different backgrounds and experiences. It's phenomenal to work with fantastic partners like you all at Dean Dorton. And I just can't say enough about how important it is and how much you're doing such good, as you said, it's just good. how much good you're doing in the community. And I just, that has affected me personally, with, you know, approaching me and saying, how can we be supportive to the work that you're trying to do? I was just so impressed by that, and continue to be impressed and continue to celebrate opportunities for us to continue to work with you. And so with that, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for telling us about what you're doing. And to everyone that's watching, make sure to stay tuned. Hopefully along with this video, we'll have information about the workshop that's coming up, so you can get your intro into Power BI and predictive analytics with Jade and Ed and Dean Dorton in the future of work. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us be a part of everything.